Hello, we are Coping Life Talk number 121. Welcome. We go live every Saturday at 5 p.m. And our co-hosts are Candy Sheehan. Hi, Candy.
Hi.
And Scott Kiddle. Today we are hosting Renée Dineen.
Perfect.
Did I say it right? Welcome, Renée. And it is exciting. Yes, it is very, very exciting. Today, we will be talking about one very important topic, which is undoing the doing in a do crazy world. What a formula. So I guess I need to memorize it and practice it every day. We will also have subtopics. And subtopics are, and let me show that, subtopics are why to intentionally do less, learning to say no so you can say hell yes, and how to break an addiction to doing. So, welcome again to Coping Life Talk. And Renée, please introduce yourself. We're excited to have you.
Oh, thank you. What a beautiful welcome. I'm Renée Dineen. I am an organizational psychologist by education and background. And I run my own coaching and consulting business after over 20 years in high tech and biotech, leading large scale HR and strategy and change organizations. And I left that part of my life and identity behind about 7 years ago. And when I went out on my own, part of that was to shift the energy and the way that I was living my day-to-day life. Part of it was to help break my addiction to doing and to minimize the effects that my workaholic tendencies were having on my life overall. And then there was another part really to just rebalance my day, to work less and be more focused and intentional in my work and be able to do things like this, have intimate conversations about topics near and dear to my heart.
That's wonderful. And I'm so glad you're here with us because it is something that I just heard you said, addiction to doing. So that seems like addiction. And does it mean that with any addiction, that we can stop, it drives us, it gives us energy, but also seems like it damages something in us. Am I right?
Thank you for noticing the choice of that word. And I didn't choose that lightly, I'll be honest. And the reason I chose to name doing as an addiction, which I did on the TEDx platform, is because my doing life had me. I didn't have it. I was consumed with the allure of being busy. I was avoiding the bigger questions and challenges and opportunities in my life as a result. I was being, by the way, well rewarded for being a doing addict. And my identity became more about what I did and less about who I was. And so for me, in addition to some medical warnings, which I could have heeded much earlier than I did, I really gave up my power to choose for myself. And I became the person, the woman who said yes to everything.
So it seems what I hear is that while we are addicted to doing, or simply we are very busy and we are workaholics, another word. So then it's like in a way we rob ourselves from something more important that we might not even know what we can find if we slow down. Is it correct?
Absolutely. You're just
okay.
I sort of was missing the point for many years.
Okay, that's what it is, missing the point. So let's start unveiling it, undoing the doing in a do crazy world. So first of all, I understand undoing the doing, right? How about Candy and Scott? But a do crazy world, it's kind of define the world that we live in. So Candy, I think you wanted to say something.
Well, I think it seems like our world is based on what you accomplish. And I even remember conversations as a child growing up. It wasn't about talking about current events. It was about what did you accomplish today? What did you get done? And if it had been, I read a book, well, really, that wasn't quite good enough. You should have done a little bit more with your time. And so I kind of get that. And I'm so interested in knowing what you have to say about that, because it seems like it was kind of it was something that I don't think I was born with it, but somehow it was ingrained in my upbringing that doing and accomplishing was really important. And so I'm anxious to hear what you have to say, Renée.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not surprised so many people relate with the message, and unpacking it from the societal overlay that you're starting to uncover, human traits that maybe gave me a propensity to become a doing addict, like my personality or role modeling from my parents. All of those were in play for me. So for me, undoing the doing is I'm not at all telling us to do nothing. Of course, we make a contribution to the world through our actions. Absolutely. But those actions should be a natural extension of who we are. And instead, what we do has become the definition of who we are. And as a result, we've lost connection with our deepest soul's desires and our purpose for being here. And that can manifest itself physically. It did for me. I had overloaded my adrenal system so much. I devalued sleep for years. I had lost my ability to stay present, and that included being at the dinner table with my family. I couldn't get work off my mind. I don't know that I would have consciously said I'm not replaceable, but I acted like I wasn't, obviously, because other people could have done a lot of stuff that I was doing. So the undoing the doing is reorienting your relationship to what you do and don't do. It's knowing when to say yes and when to say no. It's discerning purpose and value and distinguishing between making a contribution and making other people happy. For example, there are many things that we could create tension around in this dilemma. But I'm not suggesting that you do nothing. I'm suggesting that you, instead of taking a bunch of inauthentic action that doesn't serve your purpose, likely isn't yours to do, and maybe not even deliver value, and is probably too much, and taking authentic action. So the undoing the doing is kind of rewinding it and putting it back together. And by the way, the world will not make it easy for you. The world, my world, trips were great. The money was great. The work was great. All of that was good. When I left my organization, I had a lot of friends say, but you loved what you did. And loving what you do isn't enough to sacrifice your health and well-being, your ability to be present in the relationships in your life, your ability to sense your body's need for rest, all of these things that also make for a really rich, contribute rich life.
So when you talk about, go ahead, Candy.
It was just, wow. How in the world do you do that? I see your point and I value your point, and I have absolutely no idea how I could ever do my life. So have at it. Let's hear it. Okay.
Yeah. And by the way, and the other thing about an addiction is I'm in recovery. I honestly think I will always be drawn to say yes. I just will. I have a huge fear of missing out, which is also a story I told myself. Look at me living this big, great life, doing all these things. And it was like, why? And some people call it a midlife crisis. It's a burnout. Like something happens where you wake up and say, okay, I'm done. I'm done doing life this way.
Yeah. But so who do we do it for?
Who do we do it for? Well, I've laid out 5 types of doers. So the first is the achieving doer, and that's the doer whose identity and what they achieve is one, period. Who they are is what they do, and they're constantly affirmed, and they're always looking for that next goal. Those people during, the pandemic that started a podcast, wrote a book, and launched a business, right? They're just achievers. A second, and there's a motivation in that. The second is the avoiding doer, and what they're motivating is the stillness, the sitting with the bigger stuff, the harder work. They're avoiding it by staying busy. And, as a result, they're pushing those things, kicking those cans down the road until they can't anymore. I relate to that. The third kind of doer is the avoiding, the achieving, the perfecting. They do it because they want it done a certain way. They don't trust others to do it a certain way, or they are too impatient to teach others to do it a certain way, but their standard is so high that barely anyone, including themselves, can ever meet it. So they keep overdoing, over-engineering, right? 80-20 is not in their repertoire. You have the controlling doer, and they're motivated by control. I'll just do it. I'll take care of it. I don't have the patience to wait. You have about 2 seconds if you're in the room with a controlling doer to raise your hand. Otherwise, their hand is up and it's like, let's move on, right? So there's an element of control, something that's fed by that. And then the last is the supporting doer, the one who is the people pleaser, the one who has been affirmed for their being of service their whole life, doing for others constantly, being self-sacrificial, again, until that runs out. And all 5 of those, kind of archetypes or motivations for doing, there is a point at which, if you live long enough, right, there will be a point at which you hit a wall, and that doesn't work for you anymore.
So Renee, when you work with clients, how readily are individuals able to identify themselves among those 5? Like, oh, number 3, that's me.
Yeah. Most say I relate to all 5. If it's become to the point of an addiction, right? At some point in our life, we were doing for those reasons, as opposed to, let me create a distinction. In my life, I do want to start a podcast, and my old me, the clothes that I wore for 20 plus years, so 5-ish more years ago, would have started it during the pandemic. That just made sense to me. I look at my time, I'll just start it now without saying, like, what kind of podcast do I want? Who is this for? What purpose will this serve? What's the quality of that? Being on so many podcasts, like, I know there's different layers of, different types and levels of podcasts. So, I wouldn't have even asked all those questions. I just would have done the podcast. And so I think it's impulsive, it's habitual, it's familiar, and it doesn't matter what it is. Like, if it's a good idea, I'll act on it. And so there is a sort of point at which you have to start discerning and asking yourself the bigger important questions, because what I realized, and why I say learning to say no so you can say hell yes, is that I wasn't able to give the hell yes as my full, complete present self. And there's also, that's more than a pity. That's really a shame, because that's probably the work that's most aligned with why I'm here and what my unique purpose is, and what breathes life into me, as opposed to just exhaustion and being able to sort of have that initial fix that getting something done gave me for so many years.
When you mentioned earlier on the inauthentic doing, that choice of descriptor really resonated.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think that your doing may not be mappable to your values and you just mentioned your purpose or your mission.
Yep. Well heard. You nailed it. Yep. And that's, so my message is not just show up in the world and just be yourself and life will, no, it's take authentic action as much as possible. Sometimes you do have to do something that you don't want to do, right? I mean, work, family, life, there are obligations that we have, and I'm separating that. Are you overly obligated? You should ask yourself that. But there are fundamental things that you can't say no to. But 9 out of 10 times, no is an option. And people will respect your no. We tell ourselves they won't. They will. If you're clear on your no, they will respect you. And if they don't, then that's their work, not your work. You asked me, Scott, another example. I was just working with a client the other day who's going out for 2 weeks on knee surgery. And I said, how open are you to running an experiment, which is not working at all? And she's like, huh? I'll try. And I go, what if I told you try isn't good enough? What would that look like? And of course, what word does she say? She goes, oh, I'm afraid I'll be bored. I said, well, then be bored. That's the work. And that's what's hard. Then go be bored. And she's like, I don't want to be bored. And I said, exactly. That's the point. You got to unhinge yourself from your attachment to work. That's why we're working together. And if you're not willing to experiment with new ways of being, I can't help her. You have to want that. And sometimes for me, 10 years ago, maybe the timing wouldn't have been right, but 7 years ago, and it helped that I had developed a stutter and I had developed a tremor, and they thought I had MS. And so that woke me up, but it shouldn't have taken that. Really, it shouldn't have. And I hope I say that whoever's listening, don't let it get to that, because it could have been MS. And
yeah, it could be scarier. And so what I hear is, out of personal experience, you develop the drive to help others to avoid the same mistake. Yeah. And I'm sure that you saw too many people doing the same thing over and over again, and suffering and getting sicker, and then that affects family relationship and sleep, everything. But so what is your drive? What drives you when you want to help people and coach them? What is your major purpose?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So my personal mission statement is to leave a legacy of love through my relationship with others. So what I want to most be known for is that woman who allowed you to be fully engaged and in relationship with me and others. And so in my personal life, obviously, the quality that is most critical to living that mission is the quality of my presence. And when you're with me, being fully with me. And
Good.
for you to have the attention span and the capacity to hold your light and your dark, your good and your bad, right? Your presence and lack of presence. And so that was muscles that I hadn't utilized in a long time. So building back those muscles became really purposeful for me. What drives me, what keeps me in recovery is that, and maybe another way to ask the question is what's different about my life today? Aside from like, I'm not 60 hours obligated to something else other than myself. And what's really important to me is, being able to be fully present, being able to take holiday and not working, like being able to go to dinner. I don't even think about what I'm doing tomorrow most of the time. Sleep. Still, I've been a chronic insomniac my whole life, so I don't want to pretend it's solved. And I sleep like my best friend from college who fell asleep in 2 minutes. She was out. That will probably never be me. But I mean, the quality of my life and every other aspect is so much richer, so much more impactful. And that's what drives me. I'd rather live a life on purpose and of my own choosing than a life that others see as good and big and bold. So my values, thank you for bringing that up, Scott. And someone asked me this the other day. My values were always relationship, authenticity, impact, but I wasn't living them. I was coming in and out of my values. And so now I'm really living.
Yeah, it's like you have values, but you don't have time to actually practice them and enjoy them, right? Is it what you say? That's actually probably true for many of us.
I was tasting everything, but I wasn't savoring it. And I'd rather savor it. I just would. I'd rather.
It looks good on the poster, right?
Right. That's some good marketing slogan for something.
Yeah.
Very interesting. But so I found on your website where you say that what drives me above all is the opportunity to reduce human and organizational suffering and equip people from all walks of life to live with more purpose, joy, and grace. I loved it because, and I will put it on a screen, how to live with more purpose, joy, and grace, because I think it covers actually your approach and the purpose, right? So I teach people and I coach them because I want them to learn how to live with more purpose, joy, and grace, and enjoy your own values, actually, right? It's like growing strawberries in the backyard and never have time to go and pick them up and eat them, right?
I'm gonna steal that metaphor. Yes, and I really do.
I just made it up.
I love it. What a waste. Strawberry that doesn't get eaten. But
I feel so good now.
Reduce suffering. I mean, that is motivation for me. And I suffered. And honestly, I was complicit in being a leader who portrayed success as constantly doing. And I just refused to live one more minute or to portray that as success to anyone else ever again.
Amazing.
Now, that doesn't mean, right? Someone's like, well, you did your TED Talk or you did co-author a book last year. Like, I chose those things, and those things did not put at risk my relationships with my family. I have a 15 and a 17-year-old. So they were 8 and 10 when I left. They don't remember me working like that, thankfully, because I was in a lot of therapy over my mother working 60 hours a week. She still works 60 hours a week. So at least I broke that one. But yeah, I still have an impact on the world. And so can you. In fact, for me, I think it's more.
Interestingly enough, that what I've learned, because since my both parents were workaholics, they all are. I am, and then my children are too. And I can see my grandchildren now, they're just everywhere, gymnastics, ballet. But what I've learned from my children, by the way, what my parents did not know, and I did not know until later, that for example, they know how to pace themselves. Mm-hmm. So what I've learned from them, they still work a lot of hours, too many, but they know how to stop. And they take walks, and they take a dog for a walk, they play, and a meaningful time, they have time for cooking, making latte. And so, and I realized, wait a second, somehow they still manage everything they have on their list. And so that started me on thinking that it is a way. So what I think we can discuss today, because one of the subtopics that we promised was actually how to break an addiction to doing. Let's start with that, because how? I've learned, like, again, coming back to my parents, my mom's most favorite phrase was, when she saw me working so much, she would say, people will never build a monument in your honor. And I said, Mom, did you work that hard your whole life for a monument? No. I said, why do you think that I'm working for that? So that made me think that it is some kind of an ego in us, but also genetic profile, but also expectation. So I think it's an ego. And you mentioned control. I like that, because we are in control. And also another saying that my mom had was funny, because she kind of hurt me by saying that. Imagine, so you do stuff and you're so successful and people just cannot live without you. And suddenly she said, there are no irreplaceable people.
That's right.
And I thought, excuse me? That's not the goal of my life. I felt I was irreplaceable. But so let's talk about it. Finally, opening our eyes, get rid of all this, concepts, and then break it. So how? But how?
I mean, like breaking any addiction or any propensity or like an obsession, right? That is imbalancing your life or creating more pain than gain. The first and foremost is just awareness. Does my doing life have me, or do I have it? Kind of looking yourself in the mirror and being able to say, okay, I'm overdoing it. Why? What is my need to give everything 100% when 80% of things needs 50%? Or why did I say yes to meeting my girlfriend at 6 a.m. for a walk? I absolutely hate mornings, right? Like I'd rather meet her for lunch. Or why did I raise my hand for that when I don't even want to do it? So what is that about? So the first is sort of just being with yourself with a lot of compassion and a lot of grace and as much objectivity as you can garner when we look at ourselves, and just see, am I doing too much? Am I either already at risk? Am I buried in the addiction to where I'm, a stutter and a tremor, or am I at risk? And what am I modeling to others? And so that's the first step. I think the second is being kind of willing to.
Could I ask you a question about that first step before we go on? Because I know someone who says, well, I had to volunteer to do that. If I didn't do it, it wouldn't get done. No one would do it. And I think that kind of feeds into their addiction to doing. What would you say to that person?
I'd say, so it doesn't get done. I do want to, stop being the hero. I mean, it's just, so it doesn't get done. I mean, there's something too around, like, you can't want things more for others than they want it for themselves. And unless it's your company, right, your small business or your organization, then it must not be that important. It's really rewriting those reasons that keep the addiction in place. So I am replaceable.
Right.
I don't have to do everything. My no will be respected, right? So the second step really is rewriting. This is the undoing the doing, rewriting the scripts that have held that addiction in place and knowing where the motivation is coming from. Is it a need to control? Controlling people and perfectionist people, we all have had them in our lives, and they create so much pain and suffering for others and themselves. So that's an easy one. The supporting doer or the achieving doer, those have been more revered, right? The Mother Teresa's, the whoever you would associate with doing it all, having it all, being it all, they've been revered. And so there's an identity that needs to get unhooked from that drive to do, so that it can be more authentic. And I'd say maybe a third element of breaking this addiction is recognizing that you will say yes when you mean no. And there's a point at which you just say, there I was again, right? Kind of dust yourself off and give it a go next time, because is it life or death? For some people it is. Burnout is real. Divorce is real. Illness, we now know more than ever, and the research is only going to get stronger, is created by stress, including cancer, including multiple sclerosis, including these diseases that we kind of wrote off as genetic. a lot of them are stress induced. So we're just going to have to open our eyes, keep opening our eyes in that space, but recognizing if it's at risk or not. And I love, you have this quote up here, maybe the motivation in that recovery period, and it could take weeks, it could take a lifetime, is that I promise you the journey is worthy. I promise you that your yeses will feel so much better, and the no's start to feel really good too. Like, it does get easier. It really does get easier. And for those of you who are listening, who are modeling this type of behavior to others, you're creating trauma, you're traumatizing people, and you're creating, you're messing with their values, and you're impacting their health. And we have to care about that as leaders. We have to care about that.
Interesting that you brought up, now we are on how to learn to say no so you can say yes. And that reminds me of the days when I was at school. I had 2 jobs, and my son was a teenager, and he started playing basketball. And so he waited for me so anxiously when I came from class, between going back to to work, and I had a paper to write. And I thought, if I spare an hour, I will at least start a paper. And he says, Mom, could you take me to the park? I want to go and play basketball. And it's the beginning of spring. So nice outside. And I said, no, I need to write a paper. And I have almost a headache. I need to take a short break. And he just, Mom, please take me. And it's just, he usually does not ask. But this time he kind of asked me in a way that I suddenly stopped, and I said, yes, let's go to the park, which is like, and sitting in the park on the bench, I thought, I'm not an old woman. I will go and jog. And I started making rounds. And that was a total discovery for me. First of all, the headache was gone. The fresh air, all this, breeze and spring. And I realized life is real. Life is there. Not at the desk, not at home, not driving. I could really spare those 30 minutes to allow my son to play basketball and win myself. Yeah. So I realized that when you say yes, they say no to yourself, your ambitions, and make everything perfect, but instead say yes. Oh, hell yes, I will go to the park and my son will play basketball in spite of everything. That was a discovery for me, truly.
I love it. And that's when it happens, when we shift. This is with anything, of course, but we shift our orientation towards a topic, whether it be an addiction or an obsession or a person or an identity, whatever that is. The perspective comes in the sweetest moments, and it tilts the scales. It gives you another perspective. And so all I want to encourage people to do is to experiment with doing your doing life differently. Start to experiment with it. See how it feels. See what else opens up for you. See what shifts for people in and around you. And I use that as motivation all the time. I can't even imagine working like I did and having 2 teenagers who are in athletics year round, have demanding schools. My son's applying for colleges and not being fully available to that. I can't even imagine the guilt and shame and regret that I would have had to live with. So if anyone is listening, it's worth it. And again, I don't want to minimize, there are real constraints in the world. Money, you need to make money to live, right? There are certain job demands that you cannot say no to, but start to tease those out, because there's a lot of space and a lot of grace in a lot of parts of your life where you can say no and discern and choose.
I'm glad you brought up these difficulties and reality, because it is a job and it is a need to make money, and especially difficulties in a workplace. So you don't have a luxury if your boss is very like workaholic, very much, and also very goals oriented and demands from the team to fulfill everything that is on the list. And hundreds of meetings a week, and just no stop. So I think that's what I think I liked your purpose, because you talk about to give an opportunity to reduce human and organizational suffering by equipping people to live with more purpose and grace. So because nobody can argue with you that it's idealistic to say that, well, I just drop everything and just relax and take a long walk and forget about this job and my boss. Yeah, and then you look for a job, right?
Right,
So,
right.
so what do you say
The
about?
world will not respond nicely. Yeah.
Right. So since we are on the topic of learning to say no, so we can say yes. How do you say no in a workplace that actually it can be in jeopardy if we say no too many times?
Yeah. Beautiful, fair question. When I go in and do strategy work with organizations, I have yet to meet an organization that gets the prioritization dilemma right. And here's a few things that they confuse. They don't stop things that aren't working. They don't create a culture where people can say, wait, this is not going where we wanted it to, or this is too much. They don't honor the no. And, there's beauty in no, because what no means is I'm saying no to that because I want to say yes to that, and kind of that focus on the critical few and do them really, really well. Right. That's the organizational goal. I think from a people perspective, they have to care about the health and well-being of their people. And I'm sorry, if you are overworking them, if you're having them call in at 6 a.m. and then jump on a call at 11 because you have counterparts in other parts of the world, whatever your story is around that, you need to own and be accountable for what you are creating in that person's home and personal life, which is trauma. Someone is suffering from their lack of balance, attention, health and well-being. And that could just be they're a yelling parent because they're barely getting enough sleep to have patience to parent. And it could be bigger things as well. They're just missing big moments like that. So, and then the one other thing I'll say, the organizational question, the dilemma is they confuse busy with productive. Yeah. Productive has ease. It has flow. It's why that book Flow flew off the bookshelf. And it's not because it's an easy read. It's like Quiet's for introvert, the book Quiet. Those are not easy reads. The print is small, the book is big because there's so much research, because we have such a pitch to make. That flow is what we're after. And flow can only come when you're being productive, meaning working on the right things for the right reasons at the right time. Busy is an alluring, distracting lie that we tell ourselves. Busy is not good. Busy is a distraction. So again, those would be the topics I would take in an organizational setting. And I early say, do you care about the health and well-being of your people? Yes or no? Do you have the ability to say no in your system? Can you say no? If they say no, right, then you're not working at the right level. So there's a couple little things that I would ask before going in and promising any sort of shift or change. But those are generally the three sort of places that I try to intervene.
I also found out, tell me if I'm right, that when you are a part of a team and the team has clear tasks, that it is easier for people and they know what they do during the day and they fulfill the task and then they go home. But those people who are managers, and this is where I think the problem starts, because managers and CEOs and CFOs, pastors, teachers, they have their own plan. They make their own plan for a week, for a day. And so they feel like I need to fulfill it. What I've learned, so tell me, is it the right, first of all, way to say that if you are not on the leading position, then you don't suffer from workaholic lifestyle as much as people who are in charge? Or that's incorrect?
I haven't seen that. I think it's pretty equal. What I have seen is that the leader sets the tone. Right. I mean, this is in the 90s. So thankfully it's not like this, at least in the last few places I worked, but it was like that. If I left before 6:30, I had to leave carrying a bunch of stuff with me. So here I am, a 25-year-old woman right out of grad school. Now, wasn't married, no kids. So I did have more time, but balance should be reason blind. So, and if I was shunned, I was looked at, I wasn't going to get promoted, I wasn't going to get acknowledged unless it looked like work was it for me. Like that had to be my number one priority. So that's what I did. I worked all the time. And if your identity is, the more wrapped up your identity is in your work, obviously, the more apt you are to not see the suffering.
So what I hear, okay. Thank you, because what I hear now, you convince me that it does not matter what position you have, but it's a sort of set of mind. Even if you have a fixed set of job description at work, then as soon as you get out, you still have 7-8 hours a day that you either live with purpose and joy and grace, like you say, or you live a hectic life and try to fix everything, and so that control drives you. So that means that, yeah, you're right. Now I can see that.
Yeah.
It can drive any
Have
person.
you guys ever had Yeah. And I think leaders are in a better position to shift that culture, for sure. And I hope if any leaders are listening that are resonating with this and that are starting to feel a sense of accountability, you are in a place to do that more. And for those of you who are not in a place of that kind of more formal power, I promise you, you can still have an influence with your no's. You don't want to just be a no person. Megan Trainor has a great song called No, and I use it at my retreats, and she's just no to everything, right? No and no and no, because it's so empowering. It's so empowering. But when you get clear on your desire to break any addiction you may have around doing, and to experiment with different ways of showing up in this world and making an impact, people will see you. They will. Maybe not everyone at the same time. And there may be people that don't like it. There may be, but so you have to be steadfast in your decision why you're doing that, but you can have influence. You're not a victim to corporate culture. I was not a victim. I could have put my foot down. I absolutely could have, and I never did. Yeah.
Sounds like there's real important, it's important to understand boundaries.
Yeah.
Establish good, healthy boundaries.
Yeah. And
Candy
you said
has a
break the
question.
addiction, like, do you know who you are? Like, if you don't can't answer that question, then, what's the Alice in Wonderland quote? If you don't know where you're going, dear, any road will do. If you don't know who you are, right? Your doing is going to be like a kite flying in the wind. You'll just do it all. You just will. So that's the work. And that, I think, is the work that scares people too, because like, if I figure out who I am and I realize I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right, then what? So it's not for the faint at heart. This journey is not for the faint at heart, but I promise you it's a worthy one.
The question I was wondering about, in some ways, it seems like we have gone through a workers' revolution during this pandemic, and some people just walked off the job. Others seem to, they were so work driven that they knew they were in a position they need to continue working. And what was that all about? What do you think? Are people changing their mind about their work? Are they reevaluating, or what's going on, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I believe in the collective consciousness. So you have an event like the pandemic where the whole world was in some ways suffering, but in other people were thriving, right? They're working at home. They have more balance. It was gifted to them in a way.
Yes.
For those of my clients, and there are many that are the workaholics, or maybe where the culture resisted that freedom that was inherent in the last 2 years of our life, that additional freedom and kind of where you work, were working more, right? They were never leaving their desk. They were just sitting in there. Can you imagine? And I can't imagine. So the Great Resignation has many layers. Here's the organizations that I believe, based on my exposure and my study and my background, will lose the talent war is requiring people to come back to work in jobs that don't require it. They won't do it because they got a taste of what it's like to choose, have more freedom over their daily life, to go and pick up the kids at 3 and then maybe get on a call with, Asia at 7, whatever it is, that they had more choice and in their inherent freedom. And I just don't think that's something, once you taste it and you can see it can work for you, that you're going to give away that easily. Yeah. I also do think, though, Candy, of course, all of us, and if you didn't, you missed a big opportunity, were touched in some significant and very difficult way over the last few years. Just everything that was going on during the pandemic, politically, and around social activism topics, all of that was just unearthing for so many of us, if not all of us. And I think there was pain in that and some real suffering. And I think, breakdown, breakthrough, people woke up and are more awake and more connected to who they are and what they desire and what wasn't working. So I hope none of you who got a taste of that go back. It may not be clear to you exactly how this is going to end for you or how it's going to unfold, but stay with the questions.
That's an excellent question, Candy. Thank you. And in a way, my question will relate to the same area of life, that when you talk about the collective consciousness. So you are an international speaker. You travel around the world, and also you've been on TED Talk. So since you travel, how do you see the difference between cultural difference in different nations, different cultures, countries? So from this point,
Yeah.
where do you see less of this problem of being a workaholic? Because what you talk about, it is not the problem between doing and being. So you talk about more. This is what I found on your website, and I want to quote before you answer the question. Authentic inaction is not a choice between being and doing. It's about bringing the two in harmony. It's found in those small but important moments in our day-to-day lives where we can. So I love this.
Moments in our day-to-day lives where we can, and yet often don't choose to
Don't
align
choose.
with what we do. Yeah.
But so back to the question, what country do you think can serve as an example where people have this harmony between being and doing?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I think more spiritually rich countries, I would say, have a greater perspective on their why, and kind of the role of God or universe or whatever. So you're going to get a little different orientation and attachment there. I lived in Switzerland for 5 years, so thank you for reminding me. I remember this is kind of a funny but embarrassing story. I had a boss, and he came to me very quickly after I arrived and said to me, "If you send me one more email on the weekend, I'm sending you back to America." He was really angry. He was angry at me that I was working over the weekend. I was like, well, I just don't want to go in Monday with, 200 emails. It was convenient for me, but it was also familiar. And he was like, don't do that. And then, of course, I started to schedule them all to leave my inbox at 8 a.m. on Monday morning. And he caught on to me there, too. And he's like, they said, you should be embarrassed that you're working that much.
Different culture.
That's right. He goes, no one's gonna make a monument for you for that. Sorry. In fact, they're gonna disrespect you, have a little less respect, because they're gonna think you're out of balance. You don't prioritize your family, right? Make up all sorts of stories about what that behavior might mean. And then the other thing that Swiss do is that I don't know if it's still like this, because I now have been back for 7 years, but you have to take 6 weeks, which is awesome. So they have that right too. But you have to take 2 weeks back to back off at least one time a year. And if you suffer from a burnout or health issues from work and you can't prove that you took 2 weeks off, then the company's liable. So they put their money where their mouth is. So for me, on a personal level, Switzerland showed me a different way to be with my work. Now, they obviously are still stellar in what they do. I think they're way more focused as a nation. I think they're more discerning. Maybe that's a better way to say it than focused. And I think that they're more unwilling to sacrifice the other wonderful parts of their life for work. So I had a lot of good teachers over that 5 years, and spending that much time with my family, traveling on holidays. Now that was 6 weeks plus all the holidays. Like, I got a taste of what it would be like to really be with my family. And that became something I was never going to give up again either. So that's one. I mean, I hear the Netherlands, people seem happy there. I don't know what the 4 hours of daylight in the winter mean. I would hate that, but there's something going on there, I'm sure. I would say on the opposite end, the US is pretty bad. Obviously, China's pretty bad. There are certain cultures that are really dominant in that. Yeah.
So since we are moving to our last subtopic, how to break an addiction to doing, what I hear when you brought up this back-to-back 2 weeks. So I think let's start there. So is it a scientific explanation that it should be 2 weeks?
I love it. I don't know if the answer I'm going to share is 100% accurate, but here's what I learned or experienced is that here's what I also know about the brain. When you're so engaged, imagine like a week, it takes 3 or 4 days just to detach.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
So there's a lot of science around how long it takes to sort of give yourself enough distance to truly be at rest, you know, and for that to be in your review mirror, work in the review mirror. So I think then that second week is really the holiday.
Yes.
True. Okay, that confirms what I've heard somewhere a long time ago, that when you go on vacation, that the first 3 days goes to for detachment,
Yeah.
because you still have all these projects running through your head, and then you finally rest. And then if it's 1 week, then 3 days before you go back home, the brain kicks in and you start thinking, okay, what is on my calendar? You start checking emails. So that means that only 1 day for the true vacation. So maybe that's why 2 weeks. But that's what, yeah, that's actually very accurate.
Yeah. That pina colada better be really good, because it's only the only day you're going to get to really enjoy it. Yeah, and I found that to be true for myself as well. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's very true. It's very hard to unwind and very hard to control your thoughts during vacation, not to go back into like texting your colleague or team member, checking. And it's like a culture of, it's a, first of all, a certain ethics. I think I started thinking about, like your boss told you, no, you cannot, you cannot do that. But I felt before opposite. Tell me, Scott and Candy and you, Renee, that it was different before. So if you do not email right away, right next minute, if you read an email, then you're a bad employee. Something is just not, you're not as efficient. Am I right?
That's a cultural attribute of many organizations, and I'll use it. It's so destructive. Like, give people time to think. You know how many wasted emails, and then people go back. I didn't really mean to say that now. I mean, it's just such a drain. Like, pause. And the authentic inaction can be a second. It could be a week. It could be a year, depending on the decision. But be in choice and give yourself time to reflect. Honor your body's inherent way of working, and we just don't. That's why we get adrenal system overloads and stress and burnout. I mean, all of that is a result of go, 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 go. No time to pause, think, reflect, learn, re-engage. At my website, Authentic Inaction. So I have two websites, my Renée Dineen and Authentic. I've curated really a host of resources from that touch all of this. So the power of no, to pausing, being versus doing. So all of that. I have books, podcasts, articles. So if anyone is like, kind of like, she's got me curious, but I'm just not sure. And I have very reputable publishing companies there, Harvard Business Review, Psychology Today. So some real reputable sources, if that's important to you. But I just invite you to consider what I'm saying and apply it to your own life and start to experiment and see what the world wants.
Thank you.
You to hear.
And this is a wonderful, wonderful advice. Thank you. First of all, people, I think, will get hooked up. I already am hooked up on like experiment. That sounds like a cool idea. And it's not threatening. So maybe I like it, maybe not, but maybe I will get on your website, Renée Dineen, and learn how you do this, what you offer, coaching, individual and a group. So you do organizational coaching. You had a TED Talk. So you're quite a very effective coach, I could see. But and the reason I say that, not to simply compliment you, but I see the passion. And that's why in the beginning I asked you about what drives you. I could see that what truly drives you is the desire to help people to find that harmony between being and doing that you found for yourself.
Yeah.
Too late.
Thank you for seeing me, Dr. Lydia. I love it. You're right on. You're right on. And the resources I mentioned, you can get to my other website through Renée Dineen, but are on the Authentic Inaction, which is my website solely dedicated to this topic.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So any questions before we say goodbye to Renee? Candy, Scott?
I just wanted to say thank you for saying yes to our invitation.
Well, thank you for being a voice to your listeners in this space. I've listened to several of your episodes, and really what you're doing is meaningful. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
And we hope, go ahead, Candy.
I was just going to say thank you so much. So much food for thought, because I've lived most of my life getting it wrong. And I have been very busy at times. And, someone asked me once, well, what do you really want to do yourself? And I thought, goodness, I never thought of that. So that's not good. I'm so sorry to admit that. So this really is something that, that really fills a need for so many people. It's really important what you're doing. I appreciate the work that's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. And how I phrase, I said, what do you desire? Right? What a word. I love that. What do you desire? Do that.
Yes, absolutely.
True. And I'm so glad that you found that new passion and then discovered the new way of helping people rather than working 60, 70 hours a day. What a loss. So the world found a new grace through you. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Candy. And thank you, Scott. We are Coping Live Talk. And we will see you next Saturday. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.